You're listening to The Dating Den with dating and relationship badass and best-selling author Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important dating, sex, and relationship issues you want to know about. So if you're ready for true talk that's authentic and unfiltered, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
The Dating Den, episode 13 with Benrubi. How to get your shit together and stop obsessing over him. Hey ladies, welcome back to the Dating Den, and I am just really, really pumped about our conversation today with Benrubi because, you know, she's going to talk about how you can actually create the relationship of your dreams, knowing your attachment style. This is something I literally know nothing about, so I love to be a student with you. And when Iris and I were talking before the show about, you know, this attachment style and how it really impacts your relationship, I was thinking, wow, you know, like I totally did that in my past. Sometimes I do that now. So I'm as excited as can be about this conversation. So welcome, Iris. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really thrilled to be on the other side this time, being interviewed by you.
I know. It's so fun. It's so fun. So let me tell everyone about you. Besides being a really fun and awesome and smart woman, Iris is a Menson with a master's degree in counseling psychology, and she has spent the last 16 years coaching and counseling both men and women from all walks of life and from all over the world in how to find love. She is a #1 Amazon best-selling author of her book, Lonely and Single, which sucks. 2, Loved and Adored, which is awesome. She's inspirational. She's charismatic. She's a keynote speaker. She's our people, because she's got a no-nonsense approach. She's got some humor and some wit. She's been on Slice TV and Women's Network TV, and she also hosts this amazing summit called the Awakened Relationship Summit, which I have been blessed to be a part of, with over 30 experts really focusing on how to find love in a way that works. So I am so excited to have you here. Let's just dive right in. So tell me, just give us an overview about this whole model of attachment and how it's showing up when we feel stuck in our love lives.
Yeah, so basically attachment really talks about the kind of relationship you had with your parents and whether you could depend on them. And then that shows up in relationship when conflict and tension comes up. You just end up mimicking what you learned in your family. So do you want me to step back and start with, what are the attachment styles?
Yeah, absolutely. This is like attachment style 101.
Okay, great. So they're basically 4 attachment styles, but I'm only going to talk about 3 because the 4th one is really a combination.
Okay.
So the first attachment style are children who grew up with parents who were emotionally available, were consistent. They knew that they could depend on their parent when they needed something, and they grow up into an adult that's really comfortable with who they are. They know that they're lovable. They know their partner is not going to leave them or find someone else. And I would say that that's probably about 15% of the world, for many reasons. Maybe because our parents had their own baggage from their family. Maybe our parents were busy putting food on the table. They may have had what am I looking for? Like alcoholism, all those, the addictions. Sorry, that's the word I was looking. They were addicted, and so your home was chaotic. So that moves us into what's called the insecure attachment styles. So the first one, and these are in no particular order, but the anxious attachment style comes from a child whose parents were inconsistent. Sometimes they were available and sometimes they weren't. You could never really predict. So as a child, you were always assessing, can I depend on my mom or my dad? Can I get what I need? But you also knew that you couldn't always get what you needed. So you're kind of in this anxious state all the time, always assessing and really being afraid to upset them, because that's when you would get cut off. Your connection of love to your parent would get cut off when they were upset with you. So you ended up being a good girl, a pleaser, and this is for men and women. And so you turn into an adult that's always assessing your relationship for how much distance is there between us. And when there's too much distance, which doesn't mean a lot, it means just a tiny bit of distance, like he hasn't called me back today, or he didn't text me 3 times today. What's wrong? Right? So it actually engages our anxiety, and we do what's called protest behavior. So we try to hook them back in so that we can feel good about ourselves. And we're always questioning, am I good enough? Am I lovable? Is he going to find somebody else? Is he going to love someone else more than he'll love me? So that's the anxious attachment style. I'll just stop a second and see if you have any questions on that.
Yeah, so there's 2 things that came to mind. One is that, and I'm wondering if you find this when you're coaching people on this. People have a really hard time, I think, if they didn't have a super dysfunctional family, being comfortable saying, like, it's okay that it wasn't perfect. You know, like there's clients that we work with that it's like obvious, like they had an addicted parent or they had a parent that left. But when you're looking at, you know, a different culture, a different time, and our parents can't be perfect because who is, right? How do you kind of address this with someone who's like, but you know, I had great parents. Like if I say that I have an anxious attachment style, does that mean I'm sort of like dissing my mom or dissing my dad? Does that ever come up when you're talking about this work?
Yeah, that's a really important piece because we often feel that we're being disrespectful if we're just being honest. Like I just worked with someone this morning who said to me, you know, but my mom was great. Like I had a great relationship with her. It's just that she had a nervous breakdown. She had a short period where she was alcoholic and she was on medication. So it meant she wasn't always available, but it also meant that you really didn't have a great relationship. Maybe you knew you were loved, but you knew that you couldn't always depend on your mom or your dad or your aunt or your grandmother, whoever was your caretaker. You knew that you couldn't always depend on them. And it's not because they were bad, it's because they were human.
That's it. That's like a really important concept, right? It's not because they're bad, it's because they're human.
They have their own stuff in the same way that when we get into relationship, we have our own stuff. So did our parents. We forget to see that our parents were humans, you know, that came from a set of parents that they themselves may not have been functional, that may have been, recovering from World War II, or could be the Holocaust or a war or a trauma that really impact their own ability to be consistent, not because they were bad, but because that was the limit of their skills.
That's brilliant. You know, you said that and I'm just smiling here because about 6 months ago, my daughter is a junior in college, and out of nowhere, she was like, Mom, I had this major epiphany. I'm like, what? She's like, I realized you're human. Like it hit her that I was like actually a person. And so I think that's pretty cool to realize that, you know, at 20 or 21, but I think it's a really important piece of this work is taking responsibility for our attachment style and having compassion and love for our parent. We're not saying you have to blame them. We're just saying, hey, they were going through their life. They're human, and this is how it showed up. So I wanted to like just put that out there so people can kind of be open to, you know, how does this apply to me?
All right, so let me say that that's a really important concept that you touched on, Marni, is that this isn't a place for blame because blame puts us in the victim position and we have no power.
Yeah.
But once we can take responsibility for, oh, that's what I learned in my family, and this is how it's showing up in my relationships and it's not working. All right, what do I need to do to change that?
Okay, so we've got that. We've got that on the table. We're going into with compassion. So we've got the anxious, anxiety attachment style, and what are the other ones?
Yeah, and so we have the secure, the anxious, and now I'm going to talk about the avoidant attachment style. So that's someone who grew up with parents or a caregiver that was emotionally unavailable consistently. So they learned that they can't depend on anyone. They learn to keep everyone at arm's length. They're highly proud of being independent. They actually function like an island with no bridge to another island. And they grow up into adults that, I always say God's joke on us is an avoidantly attached person will pick an anxiously attached person. So that anxiously attached person wants connection, but that want connection creates the avoidantly attached person, I'm going to say man, to feel suffocated. So he pulls back. And as he pulls back, it increases the anxiety for the anxiously attached person. So they keep chasing. And as they chase, it makes the avoidantly attached, let's say man, pull back even more. And it's kind of like this self-fulfilling prophecy that's never ending. And so it's about the anxiety that comes up in a relationship and how you manage it. The anxious will become a Klingon. Text, are you okay? I'm worried about you. I didn't hear from you for 20 minutes. I texted you an hour ago. You didn't respond to me. And the avoidant will pull back and also doesn't like tension because it often feels like they're suffocated by the other person. And so they'll disappear for hours.
Yeah. I think I'm married to this person.
But, usually an anxiously attached woman, which tends to be more common, will marry an avoidantly attached man, and for good reason, because the anxiously attached person is the glue for relationship. Two people who are keeping each other at arm's length, they're just like roommates. There's no passion.
Right.
So it's actually quite common.
This is really interesting. This is why I love doing this podcast, because I learn for myself. So what I'm hearing you say is, and my husband grew up when he was about, I think maybe 2 or 3. He had a sibling who choked and died, right? And so it was really awful, obviously. And so his parents were dealing with their own grief, and unavailable, right? And so what's really interesting, and so I want you to comment on this. So is when you have an attachment style, what I hear you say is that it's a learned behavior. So it's not like inherent or like genetic or their personality, or does it all sort of come together as one and it's like, there is no really difference? Can you talk into that?
Yeah, they started to do the testing on this in the research back in the 1950s. And so it definitely is a learned behavior. And it really comes from what is your strategy when you're feeling anxious. And so as a child, if you were anxiously attached, you learn to just always gauge, am I okay? Am I okay? Like, how far are they okay with me? Am I still a good girl? And if you're avoidantly attached, it's like, I can't depend on them anyway. So if I get anxious, I can only deal with things with myself. Let me cut everyone else out because all they're going to do is just suffocate me and drown me. And so when we start to manage our anxiety, then that's when we can step out of this. It's all about degree to begin with. We're never 100% one style. So I can say for that about 15 years ago, I was about 80% anxious, maybe 10% secure, 10% avoidant. And now that I've worked on myself for 15 years, I'm about 80% secure, 10% anxious, 10% avoidant. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't show up. It just means that in relationship, more often than not, I'll deal with the very difficult conversations, even though I don't like it, it's not comfortable. But I can give you a quick example that just happened, I don't know, about a month ago with my partner, where I knew he was flying out and I couldn't remember, is he going to call me at 12? Is he leaving the office at 12? Or is the flight leaving at 12? And I'm looking at my watch and it's 11:15 and my anxiety's going up. What if he forgets to call me? What if he leaves without calling me? It's 11:30, my anxiety's going up, 11:45, 12 o'clock, and my anxiety's really high, but I know enough. In my head, I am 120% sure he would never leave without calling me. But that little girl inside of me got so anxious. What if he forgot about me? And so that part's not healed yet. And in a healthy relationship, this is what happened. He called me at 12 and I said to him with tears in my eyes, I have to tell you, over the last 45 minutes, my anxiety has been going up so high because I was so afraid you were going to leave without calling me. And he went, oh, sweetie, I would never leave without calling you. And I could go, okay,
right.
Yeah. That's what happens when we both happen to be therapists, so it's a little easier for us because we're quite familiar with this, but we can help each other heal from the things we learned in childhood. Like I have a couple that I'm working with that I just worked with this morning. And his position is, I need to test her all the time because I could never depend on my parents. And I know that this isn't healthy, but I need her to prove that she's not going to leave me.
Mm. Wow, that's deep.
It is. And we act these things out unconsciously until we start to look at, okay, how do I deal with anxiety? And the anxiety is, what if this relationship doesn't work? What if he or she walks away? What if he or she criticizes me? And I can tell you that once I was exposed to this attachment style work, I felt like this was the holy grail to relationships. This really explains why we get so triggered and upset and why we push or suffocate someone.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Okay, so we've got avoidant, we've got anxious, we've got secure. Is there another one?
Yeah, so the fourth one is let me just tell you what it comes out of is having a parent where you could never succeed. So your parent says, can you go fill up the dishwasher with the dishes that are in the sink? And after you do it, your mother goes and restacks everything because you didn't do it properly. And so what you went in was to do something to please your mom to get the love. And her behavior, whether she criticized how you did it or just did it again because you didn't do it well enough, the message was you never measure up. And so you're in this constant circle of trying to prove your value and never getting it. And so how you deal with anxiety is you push and you pull.
Okay.
And that's called a disorganized. That, we don't spend a lot of time on that. If we just focus on the anxious and the avoidant, because the disorganized use both of those techniques to deal with anxiety, we'll be able to cover it all.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that's great. So how do you know whether you're having, this unhealthy attachment to someone or you really do care for them? How do you use this information to really figure out how you can change your results in your love life?
Yeah, so a few things. I don't really believe that we get into a relationship just to get those it's hard for me to say it's not just to get those attachment needs, but the number one thing we need after safety, which is home, clothing, and food, is we need belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And we will want to attach to someone, ideally, who can see us and hear us and understand us. But sometimes we attach to unhealthy people, and that's when especially the attachment style gets triggered. And so there's a couple things. One, you want to know, how do you deal with anxiety in a relationship? So if the guy or the girl doesn't call, how do you respond to that? When does your anxiety get triggered, and what do you do about it? Do you reach out to them to get the answer that you need to feel better? Or do you make a decision, well, I knew I couldn't depend on this person, and you cut them off emotionally and you don't even feel anything? They might text you and say, where are you? I haven't heard from you. Are you okay? And you look at the text and you just put the phone down and you don't even care.
Yeah.
So one, you need to start to look at, how do you deal with tension in relationship? When there's a possible break in the connection. So let me use this metaphor. The way I see people is that before we were born, we were attached to our mother through an umbilical cord that gave us everything we needed to thrive. Once we were born, that umbilical cord got cut, but we have an energetic umbilical cord to everyone, especially the really important people. It could be a little one to the coffee shop you go to regularly, but the important ones are to your partner, maybe a parent, your best friend. And what happens when there's tension and conflict, you often feel like that umbilical cord, the energetic umbilical cord, gets cut. And what you end up with the anxiety is like when your phone is at 4% and you're dying to plug it in someplace, you're looking for someplace to plug it in.
Yes.
That's how we deal with anxiety, right? Or we say, I'm trying to find a nice word, screw it, and let the phone die.
Right.
Depending on your attachment style. So what we're trying to do ultimately is to be connected with that umbilical cord, with that primary love person, and to have it feel like it's this thick umbilical cord that's giving you everything you need to soar, to support support you, to be seen. And sometimes you pick people where it feels like a spider thread,
Okay.
when one little tiny thing can actually break it.
So how do you know? I mean, how do you know when it's them and when it's you?
Well, it's both.
Okay.
Right? It's always both. So you want to look at what's the part of that you bring in. What's your style? How do you respond to it? How does that impact a relationship? If I become a Klingon to my partner and text him like over an hour, like 10 times, where are you? You didn't respond to me. He's naturally going to want to pull back. It's like, whoa, I'm going to drown.
Right.
It's the feeling like, you know how we learn when somebody's actually drowning, don't jump in the water to try to save them because they're going to actually suck you down with them. You actually reach out with something to help them to get out of that, but you don't step into it because they're going to drown you with them. And that's what it feels like for the avoidant attachment style. When you get too needy, too clingy, he can't deal with it because it's too big of a burden. And I'm just going to talk in terms of him and her, even though we switch these around.
Yeah. No, totally. So I always call that like, don't go down the rabbit hole with the person.
Yes.
Right. So so how does that act out? Like, what does it look like in real life? So I love this texting example. So let's make it more specific. So you're dating someone, they said they'd call you, you're in a relationship, they said they'd call you, and nothing happens. You're like looking at your phone. What's going on? Break it down in the attachment style.
Yeah, and so the attachment style, what it's bringing up is your sense of value and your, I'm going to say the thickness of that umbilical cord.
Okay.
The more secure, the more you know that you're valuable, the more you know that you're lovable, the more you know that, you know what, I'd really like this relationship to work out. But if it doesn't, I know I'll find someone else. The easier it is for you to deal with the anxiety that happens always in relationship, especially when we're starting to date, because there's no predictability. You don't know the person, so you don't know if they're going to follow through on what they say they're going to do, whether they're going to dismiss you. So your job, and I'm talking more from the anxious style, is to manage your anxiety. You know, I once interviewed Dr. John Gray, and he differentiated need from needy. We need to be attached to someone who sees us, understands us, supports us. Needy is that bottomless pit where your needs, no matter what the other person does, can never be filled.
Right.
So if you have the neediness, then it's your job to manage your anxiety, whether it's breathing, a guided visualization, you know, an autogenic or progressive muscle relaxation technique, something where you're taking care of you so that when you connect with I'm going to say if it's a woman that's anxious, if you're connecting with your man, he doesn't feel like you're going to drown him.
So you can create that space.
Totally. And just in the same way that I didn't reach out in the 45 minutes to my partner, because in my head, I knew he wasn't going to leave. I knew this was a little child in me and I needed to manage my anxiety. And then I became transparent, which is intimacy. And I said to him, I have to be honest with you. I was so scared you were going to leave without calling me. And I've had so much anxiety in the last 45 minutes. That allowed him to see what my trigger is, my wounding from childhood, and it allowed him to step in and go, oh, sweetie, I would never leave. And it allowed me to reconnect. That 4% battery just got plugged in.
Yep.
And I know I'm fine. And so we can actually train our partners to say or give us what we need. You know, when I get really anxious and I'm texting you, I just need you to let me know. Don't worry, I'll call you in an hour. I'm just in a meeting. Or I'll call you when I get out of the gym. Or you know what? I'm going to take a couple of hours off. My phone's going to be off. I'll call you before bedtime or in the morning. It's training our avoidantly attached partners to let us know that we are still okay, that umbilical cord didn't get broken, and we will hear from them again.
Okay, so there's two pieces here. One is managing your own emotions. And what I really want to point out is that you have done enough work, you're self-aware enough to know that that anxiety is coming from that emotional child, right? Trying to get their childhood needs met transferring it into an adult situation. So that's, that's really, really big. And then the other piece is knowing that you take this partner, this person that you're in relationship with, and you help them to meet your needs. You're articulating what those needs are, and you're giving them a way to meet that need.
Totally. So what it is being responsible for yourself. And this is part of your assessment of whether your partner can step out of what's comfortable for him or her and be able to shift to step in to take care of your distress. They're not responsible for it, but they love you enough to do something different to help you manage your own anxiety.
I love that. So how does someone start to spot this? Like, is there an exercise or a test or something that you can do to start to create that awareness for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's fairly simple. Just look at when you get anxious, whether it's in a romantic relationship or anybody who's really important for you. It could be a really close girlfriend, or if you're really close to your mom. What happens if you don't hear from them for a couple hours? Or if you send out, do you want to go out tonight, and you don't hear back from them? Do you flip? Do you freak out and text them like, are you okay? I haven't heard back from you. Do you just get anxious and you don't say anything? Or do you just say like, F this, I don't need this. I don't need this friend. I'll find somebody else. Do you push them away, or do you become a Klingon?
Interesting. And as you sort of evolve, do you see in your practice that people will sort of go from anxious attachment to avoidant to then trying to kind of be somewhere in the middle to being secure? Do you ever see that?
They don't tend to shift from one extreme to the other. What happens is, over time, as you evolve, the amount of unhealthy attachment, insecure attachment diminishes, and the secure attachment increases.
Okay, awesome.
So you don't get triggered as quickly, or when you do, you don't defect right away to that inner wounded child. You stay an adult and say, sweetie, I do best with daily communication, so that you can actually speak what you need.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So I can just hear the listeners right now in their mind going, okay, because I find that, people who are listening to this show are very much black and white thinkers. They love this kind of conversation because, it helps sort of like put them in control, right? Like, oh, this is information. Now I'm in control. Now I can understand. Now I can fix it. Now I can do something. And so the voice in their head, I feel like, is saying, so let's just say you've had a couple of conversations with someone online, or you've gone on 1 or 2 dates with them. Is it realistic to start noticing this stuff? Should you be looking for this? How do you use this information, Iris, like on first dates, second dates, before you're in a relationship?
Absolutely. This is what you do right from the beginning. You start to gauge the person's attachment style, which tells you how they're going to respond to you when there's tension in the relationship. And it just gives you I don't know what the word I'm looking for, maybe model from which to talk to them through. So if you know somebody who's really anxious, if you're the more avoidant style, attachment style, and they're more anxious, then you start to tell them, you know what? Yeah, it can't be on the second date. Obviously, this is a little bit more into the relationship. I'm not going to be available for the next couple days, but I'll give you a call when I'm back in town, or I'm going to the gym and I won't be able to respond for a few hours if somebody's really anxious. Or in the flip side, if you're the anxious attachment and you've been going out for like 6 weeks, a couple months with someone, you can say, I do best with daily communication. And then you get to see, can they step in and give you what you need? And you start to see, does this person dismiss me? Do they tell me I'm too sensitive? Do they try to get me to see reason when I'm feeling emotional? It's funny that one of my clients today, and this happened to me too, is in a relationship where my boyfriend used to tell me, well, you shouldn't feel that way. And I used to look my body over, up and down and say, well, tell me where that switch is and I'll turn it off.
Right, exactly.
Right. So somebody with the avoidant attachment style will dismiss emotions.
Okay. So then you're going to come back and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. What I need from you is to just acknowledge and support me by doing this.
Exactly. And then you start to see, are they able to give you what they need? I'll give you a quick example. I went out with a man that was avoidantly attached. I kind of knew as we were going on in this, I don't know, we might have gone on for like 3 months. But at one point, I woke up in the morning and I'd had a bad dream about my child. And the dream was 9 years old and I'd left her someplace. And then she called me, Mommy, come pick me up. And I'm on the phone and going, well, where are you? And she's going, I don't know. And I'm freaking out because I can't find her and I don't know how to pick her up. And I woke up in the morning and I was crying. And I knew not to call him. However, he called me later in the day and he said, how are you? And I said, I'm fine. I just had a really bad nightmare last night. And I explained it to him and he got so upset. He said, dreams don't mean anything. And I said, well, hang on a second. I'm the therapist here. I took a course. I said, I took a course once in dreams. And I'm thinking, well, why would you take a course if it doesn't mean anything? But he said, I took a course in dreams and call me back when you realize they don't mean anything. And he hung up.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's not very supportive or
but
compassionate.
it's someone who can't manage what feels like chaos with emotions.
Yeah.
And I said to him when we reconnected, you really have a tough time with emotions, don't you? And he said yes. And I also knew that this wasn't workable. If you're hanging up on me when I need support, this relationship for me is not workable.
Yeah, no, I think that's so interesting. And what's amazing from what you're saying, and I'm just, of course, making it all about me. I'm thinking about Jeremy, and he's totally that avoidant. But what's really cool is we've been together long enough where, you know, it's like when I will have a lot of emotion, I can tell it makes him really uncomfortable. And he'll want to say like things like, it'll be fine, or that minimizing, or try to solve it, which men do anyway. But at this point, what's really great is because I know that about him. I'll say like, I know you want me to feel better because it makes you feel sad that I'm sad and you want to fix it. But what I need from you right now is just a hug, or what I need from you just right now is this. And so what I hear you saying is that we all are working on this, right? We're all working toward, well, at least if we're in a conscious path, right? We're working toward becoming more secure and changing those percentages. And so what you want is a man or a partner that is able to have these kinds of conversations with you and not hang up and not run away and not be so avoidant that they avoid what is required to create intimacy.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the nail. And the one thing that creates the most tension and conflict in a relationship is when your partner is not willing to step in when you're feeling uncomfortable, unhappy. And so if we can start to gauge our partners and see, are they willing to step out of what's comfortable for them to take care of me minimally in this moment, not responsible for my whole life, but when I get anxious to say, oh, sweetie, I had no idea. I'll make sure that I'll call you more often. It goes, okay, I can breathe now. I'm going to get my needs met in relationships. Some of it is my responsibility, and some of it is the relationship responsibility.
I love that. Okay. I have to circle back because I want to make sure for those women who are thinking, we talked about, you know, third, fourth, fifth, sixth date. How far do I take this on that first or second date? What are some ways to just sort of have an observation about someone's attachment style without making a giant assumption?
Yeah, so you really want to start to take in, does he dismiss anything that's emotional? Does he follow through on what he says he's going to do? And that's really a commitment issue. With people with avoidant attachment style tend to have more issues with commitment. Let me jump into something else a minute. There are more people with an avoidant attachment style in the dating pool because they naturally push others away and they end up breaking relationships and jumping into dating. People with a secure attachment style really find their mate and work on relationship. People with an anxious attachment style keep trying and trying and trying and trying way beyond what they should be. So the people that are in the dating pool most often are the avoidantly attached. So don't be surprised if you start to pick that up. Somebody who doesn't let you into his private life, somebody that doesn't include you in his plans. And it's not in the first couple dates, but you'll start to pick it up like a twinge that, you know, we've gone out like 3 or 4 times and I don't know a thing about him. That's someone who's keeping you at arm's length.
Right. Okay. Awesome. So, and I think the other takeaway I would love for people to have from this is the most important thing is to really look at your own attachment style and be able to manage that. And then from there, you can look at the people that you're dating or the people that you're in a relationship with.
That's where all the power is when you look at your own stuff and learn to manage you. It means you're not at the mercy of the other person. It also means that you're not such a heavy burden to carry when you're in a relationship. Because when you're managing your needs, the other person, it's easier for him to step in and take care of you because he doesn't feel like he's carrying too big of a load and he's going to drown with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I first started my practice, I coached some men, and I had this guy, Dave, who was my client, and he was dating this woman, Angelica, and she was definitely an anxious attachment style. And he'd tell me these stories, and he was a very good storyteller. And in the end, really, that's why he ended up breaking up with her, because at the beginning, he was into how much she was into him and spending all this time together. And, then 6 weeks, 8 weeks passed and he was like, I got to go back to my life. I got a son, I got a career. And he couldn't make that return to balance, And so he ended up having to leave that relationship because that anxious attachment style, he could never make her feel secure enough. And so I think it's really an important piece of the work for those who are listening is, whatever your attachment style is, what are the steps that you are going to take, like Iris did, to start to move toward that secure attachment style? Because in the end, it doesn't matter sort of where you are, it's where are you going to be, right? So that you can have the relationship that you want.
Yeah, it's okay to have needs. It's when you get needy, when it's a bottomless pit, that's when a healthy person isn't going to want to take that on.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So right as we are launching this episode, you are also launching your latest summit, which I have been honored to be a part of. So if you're listening to this as it is live coming up, make sure you go in the show notes and check out Iris's relationship summit. You are undoubtedly, the queen of bringing experts together because
Thank you.
you get the best people. You're in it to win it. This is really your thing. And I'm just really excited to be part of it. And I'm excited for all our listeners to check it out. So, and if you're listening to this and it's not, exactly when the summit's going on live, just click on that link in the show notes and you're going to be able to get connected to Iris and her work. Any last words? I always kind of think sometimes when I'm interviewing somebody about, if you would, go back to yourself, when you were really in that anxious attachment style and where you are now, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think that for me, the work was really to get that I am lovable, I am enough, and learning to take that power cord from my cell phone that's at 4% and learning to plug it into me so that I can manage my anxiety rather than always looking outside of me to plug it into a man to tell me that I'm good enough, and often picking men that weren't healthy because I was too anxious to get somebody to tell me that I am good enough and lovable. And at least if I'm in a relationship, at least that's some indication that I'm lovable because someone picked me. And to be able to get myself to a place where I love me enough that I'm going to be discerning before I jump into a relationship that may just create suffering and misery for me, and be able to pick a man who really reflects how much I love me, which is where I'm at now. I've done the work and I wish I had that 15 years ago.
Well, for those of you who are listening, now is your day to start doing the work. Because, that's really why Iris is here. It's why I'm here, is because if it ain't working, look inside and change what you can, which, creates amazing results. And by the way, I was just looking at your bio. I just have to bring this up before we wrap up. How cool are you? You've traveled in 54 countries and you ride a motorcycle. So besides all that, you are a really cool, fun, interesting person. So make sure you go in the show notes and get connected to Iris. Wow, what a fun conversation. And I just so appreciate you bringing your wisdom to the Dating Den.
Thanks, Marni. I'd also like to offer, it just kind of popped into my head, I actually have a checklist for people to start to what to look for if somebody's avoidantly attached or anxiously attached that I also would like to offer to your listeners.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to put a link to that in the show notes so you can get started doing the work, the play, the fun, get started on your journey to find love. So Iris, it's been a blast. I'd love to have you back in the Dating Den sometime soon, and I appreciate you so very much.
Thank you. I absolutely loved being on the other side. I've interviewed you so many times. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, ladies.